Google knows. Google always knows. Every search you make, every address you look up, every image you request, every question you type into that search bar. Google records it. Google timestamps it. Google geolocates it. And when it becomes relevant to a criminal investigation, that data can tell a story about who was interested in what and when. In the case of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, Fox News Digital reported on February 18, 2026, that they were able to recreate Google Trends reports showing searches for Nancy's address and for Savannah Guthrie's salary occurring in the months before Nancy vanished. Searches that appeared to show someone was looking for her address as far back as June 2025, searching for images of her home in March and again in late November, and searching for information about Savannah's salary in December, just weeks before Nancy disappeared. This sounds like a digital trail, a pattern, evidence of planning and surveillance that stretched across 8 months. The kind of premeditation that could help investigators understand not just what happened on the night of January 31st, but who was preparing for it long before that night arrived. But before we dive into what these searches might mean, before we examine the timeline and the patterns and the connections, we need to talk about something critically important that Google itself said about this data, something that fundamentally changes how we should interpret these findings. Something that means these searches may be evidence of criminal planning, or they may be nothing more than algorithmic noise inserted by Google to protect user privacy. Google issued a statement to Fox News specifically addressing this situation, and what they said is crucial to understanding what this data actually represents. Google Trends is designed for understanding trends in large data sets, for analyzing aggregate search behavior across millions of users. For topics with low search volume or no searches at all, the system often mixes in random noise to protect people's privacy. That means a Google Trends chart showing activity for an uncommon search term and a specific residential address is absolutely an uncommon search, is not definitive evidence that the search actually happened. It could be real, or it could be algorithmic noise that Google's privacy protection systems inserted. This is the tension we need to examine carefully and honestly. The gap between what appears to show up in publicly accessible Google Trends data and what actually constitutes evidence that law enforcement can use. The difference between a marketing tool designed to show aggregate patterns and the investigative-grade data that comes from legal subpoenas served on Google by law enforcement. If you want to understand how digital evidence actually works in criminal investigations, what investigators can really access versus what the public can see, what these Google searches might mean if they are real, and what investigators are likely doing right now to determine if they are real, then you need to subscribe to True Crime Vault right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we break down the real investigative process, the actual mechanics of how cases get solved, not just the headlines that make it sound simple. Hit that like button as well because this kind of detailed, honest analysis deserves to reach everyone following this case. Now let us examine what Fox News found, what Google said about it, what the limitations of this data are, and what investigators are likely doing with actual legal tools that go far beyond what any member of the public can access through Google Trends. Fox News Digital reported that they were able to recreate Google Trends queries showing apparent activity for Nancy Guthrie's address during specific time windows in the months before she disappeared. Let us go through each of these reported data points carefully and systematically, understanding what the public Google Trends tool shows, what it means, and what limitations exist in interpreting that data. The first reported search activity for Nancy's Catalina Foothills address appeared in Google Trends data for the week between June 21st and June 28, 2025. According to the Fox News report, the data indicated that someone in Arizona searched for this address during that week. This is approximately 7 to 8 months before Nancy disappeared on February 1st, 2026. If this search was real, if it represents an actual person sitting at a computer or holding a smartphone and typing Nancy Guthrie's home address into Google's search bar in late June of 2025, it suggests that someone's interest in Nancy or her location goes back significantly further than the immediate days or weeks before her disappearance. Why would someone search for Nancy's address in June? What could explain interest in her location 8 months before the crime occurred? Several possibilities exist and all of them warrant examination. It could have been the beginning of target selection, someone researching potential victims, looking at residential addresses in the Catalina foothills area, trying to identify homes that might be suitable for whatever they were planning. The Catalina foothills is an affluent area, large homes, substantial properties, residents with financial resources. If someone was looking for a target for a financially motivated crime, searching addresses in that neighborhood would be part of the research process. It could have been someone who became aware of Nancy through her connection to Savannah. Perhaps they saw Savannah on television, learned she was from Tucson, did some research about her family, and found Nancy's address through public records or through articles mentioning where Savannah's mother lived. That discovery in June could have been the spark that led to months of additional research and eventually to planning and execution. It could also have been completely innocent. Someone who knew Nancy or her family searching for the address to send something. A friend or acquaintance who needed the information for legitimate reasons. Someone interested in the neighborhood or in real estate who was looking at multiple addresses in the area. The search existing does not prove criminal intent. It only becomes significant if it connects to other evidence and to other searches that create a pattern. But if the June search was the start of something, if it represents the moment someone first identified Nancy as a potential target, then everything that came after, all the subsequent searches, all the planning, all the surveillance, traces back to that week in June 2025. The second data point Fox News identified was a Google image search for Nancy's address sometime between March 1st and March 8th, 2025. This is 3 to 4 months before the initial address search in June and 9 to 10 months before Nancy disappeared. Image searches are qualitatively different from text-based address searches. When you search Google Images for an address, you are looking for visual information, photographs, satellite imagery, street-level views from Google Street View, maps showing the property boundaries and the surrounding area. Why would someone search for images of Nancy's address? Because they wanted to see what the property looked like. They wanted to understand the layout, the landscaping, the approach, the visibility from the street. They wanted to know if there were security cameras visible. They wanted to see where the entrance was, how the driveway was configured, whether there were neighbors close by or whether the property was relatively isolated. This is reconnaissance. This is what someone does when they are planning to go to a location and they want to understand what they will encounter when they get there. In the modern era, you do not need to physically visit a property to conduct surveillance. Google Earth provides satellite imagery with resolution detailed enough to see individual trees and vehicles. Google Street View provides ground-level photography from the perspective of someone driving down the street. Property records and real estate websites often have photos of homes if they have been sold in recent years. Someone planning a crime at a specific location would use all of these resources to study the target before ever approaching it in person. The image search in early March, if it was real, suggests that level of advanced planning. Someone wanted to see Nancy's home. They wanted visual information. And they wanted it 9 months before they would eventually come to that property armed and masked in the early hours of February 1st, 2026. But again, we must acknowledge the possibility of innocent explanations. Real estate professionals search for property images constantly as part of their work. Appraisers, inspectors, agents, all of them use Google to look at properties. Someone interested in the neighborhood or in the architectural style of homes in the Catalina foothills might search for images out of curiosity. A delivery driver who was going to make a delivery to that address might search for images to see where they were going and where to find the entrance. The search becomes significant, not in isolation, but in pattern. If the same source searched for images in March and then searched for the address itself in June, and then searched again in November and January, that pattern of sustained interest over time is what transforms isolated data points into evidence of surveillance. Then we have the address search that appeared on January 11, 2026. This date is particularly significant for several reasons. First, it is exactly 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared. 21 days. Close enough to the crime that it could represent final preparations, last-minute verification of information, confirmation of details before executing a plan. Second, and this is where the January 11th date becomes especially interesting, it also appeared in a separate context entirely. On February 12th, someone identifying themselves as a neighbor posted a message on the Ring Neighbors app, which is a platform where people with Ring security cameras can share information and video with others in their area. This neighbor specifically asked other neighbors to share video from between 9 p.m. and midnight on January 11th, as well as from the evening of January 31st when Nancy was last seen. Why would a neighbor specifically flag January 11th? What happened that night that made it significant enough to request video from that specific time frame? The Pima County Sheriff's Department clarified publicly that the ring post did not come from official law enforcement. It was posted by a private citizen, a neighbor in the area. The official request from PCSD through the Neighbors app asked for video from a much broader time frame, January 1st through February 2nd, covering the entire month essentially. But this neighbor had identified January 11th as a specific date of interest and had requested video from a specific 3-hour window that evening. The coincidence of January 11th appearing both in Google Trends data showing a search for Nancy's address and in a neighbor's request for security video from that same date creates a connection that investigators would absolutely examine. What is the probability that those two things are unrelated? That someone randomly searched for Nancy's address on the same date that something significant enough happened in her neighborhood to prompt a neighbor to later request video from that evening? One possibility is that January 11th was a surveillance visit. Someone drove through the neighborhood, looked at Nancy's home, studied the property in person to confirm what they had learned from months of Google searches and satellite imagery. If that visit occurred between 9 p.m. and midnight, which is late enough that a vehicle moving slowly through a residential neighborhood or someone walking or standing near a property would be more noticeable and more likely to be captured on security cameras, there might be footage showing who was there. Another possibility is that January 11th was an attempted approach or reconnaissance that was interrupted or abandoned. Someone came to the property intending to do something, saw something that made them change their mind or wait for a different opportunity, and left. Perhaps they realized there was more activity in the neighborhood than they expected. Perhaps a neighbor's lights came on or someone was outside. Perhaps they simply got nervous and decided to come back another time. 3 weeks later, on January 31st, they returned and followed through. A third possibility is that the January 11th search and the neighbor's later identification of that date as significant are entirely coincidental. Perhaps someone else searched for Nancy's address for unrelated reasons on that date, and perhaps something completely unconnected to this crime occurred in the neighborhood that evening that the neighbor noticed and later thought might be relevant. Coincidences do happen, but in a criminal investigation you do not dismiss coincidences without examining them thoroughly. Before we go further, I want to make sure you are getting the most out of this content. If you are finding this analysis valuable, if you appreciate the depth and the honesty about what evidence actually means versus what speculation sounds like, then make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Vault. We do not just repeat headlines. We break down how investigations actually work. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you never miss a development in this case or in any of the other cases we cover. And take a moment right now to hit that like button and to leave a comment below telling us what you think about the Google Trends evidence. Do you think these searches are real, or do you think they are algorithmic noise? Does the January 11th connection seem significant to you? The conversation in our comments section is always thoughtful and intelligent, and we read every single comment. Now let us continue examining this evidence. The next data point is the second image search, which appeared in Google Trends data sometime between November 30th and December 1st, 2025. This is 2 months before Nancy disappeared and 6 to 7 months after the first image search in March. If both image searches were real and came from the same source, it suggests someone who checked the property visually in March continued to think about or plan for something related to that address over the following months, and then checked again in late November or early December. Why check twice? Several reasons are possible. The property might have changed. Landscaping might have been updated. Cameras might have been added or moved. The person might have been refining their plan and wanted to verify specific details they had noted months earlier. Or the person might have been working from memory of the March search and wanted fresh confirmation before moving forward with something they had been considering for the better part of a year. Again, innocent explanations exist, but the pattern of 2 image searches separated by 8 months, combined with address searches in June, November, and January, creates a picture of sustained and repeated interest in Nancy's property that is harder to explain through innocent coincidence. And then we have the search that connects this entire pattern to financial motivation. Between December 13th and December 20th, 2025, Google Trends data shows that someone in Tucson searched for Savannah Guthrie salary. Savannah is one of the most recognizable journalists in American television. She has co-hosted NBC's Today Show for over a decade. She has moderated presidential debates. She is a household name in American media. And while her exact compensation is not public information in the way that corporate executive salaries at publicly traded companies are disclosed in SEC filings, her prominence means there are estimates, articles, and speculation about what top television personalities earn. Why would someone in Tucson search for Savannah Guthrie's salary in mid-December, approximately 6 to 7 weeks before her mother disappeared in a case where ransom notes demanding millions of dollars would later be sent to media organizations claiming that Nancy was being held for money? The inference is almost unavoidable. Someone was trying to understand the family's financial resources. Someone wanted to know how much money Savannah made because they were evaluating whether this family was a viable target for a financially motivated crime. Fox News, in its reporting, noted that searches for celebrity journalists' salaries occur regularly and are not inherently connected to criminal activity. To demonstrate this, they noted that Google Trends also shows searches for Anderson Cooper's salary from the New York City area in late March 2025 and Sean Hannity's salary, also from New York, in early May 2025. These comparison searches exist in the data. People do search for how much famous journalists earn, presumably out of curiosity about the industry or about public figures they see on television. But there is a critical difference between someone in New York City searching for Anderson Cooper's salary, when Anderson Cooper is based in New York and is a prominent figure in that city's media landscape, and someone in Tucson searching for Savannah Guthrie's salary just weeks before her mother, who lives in Tucson, disappears under circumstances that involve ransom demands for millions of dollars. The geographic and temporal proximity of the Savannah salary search to the location and timing of Nancy's disappearance creates a connection that is much harder to dismiss as casual curiosity. If the salary search came from the same source as the address searches, if subpoenaed Google records show that the same IP address or the same Google account searched for Nancy's address multiple times across several months and also searched for Savannah's salary in December, that pattern tells a story. It tells a story of someone who identified Nancy as a target, researched her property, studied it visually, monitored it over time, and evaluated the family's financial resources to determine whether they had the money to pay a ransom. That story, if it can be proven through actual investigative-grade data, rather than through publicly visible Google Trends patterns, is evidence of months of planning and premeditation. It is evidence that transforms what might appear to be an impulsive act of violence into a carefully planned operation that was researched, studied, and prepared for across the better part of a year. But now we need to confront directly and honestly the limitation that undermines all of this analysis. The limitation that Google itself stated clearly in its response to Fox News. Google Trends data for uncommon search terms often includes random noise inserted to protect user privacy. A spike in the data does not constitute definitive evidence that anyone actually searched for the term. The pattern we have been examining, the searches spanning from June 2025 to January 2026, might be real, or it might be partially real and partially noise, or it might be entirely noise. Algorithmic artifacts that Google systems created to prevent the kind of identification of individual users that would occur if every rare search was precisely trackable through a public tool. This is not a small caveat. This is fundamental to understanding what this data represents. Without access to Google's actual internal search logs through legal subpoena, we cannot know with certainty whether the searches Fox News identified in Google Trends correspond to real queries made by real people, or whether they are privacy-protecting noise. A source familiar with the investigation told Fox News that law enforcement would use investigative tools like subpoenas, not publicly available marketing information. This statement is critically important because it draws the distinction between what the public can see and what investigators can access. What Fox News found by querying Google Trends is interesting. It creates a narrative. It suggests patterns, but it is not evidence in the legal sense. It cannot be used in court. It cannot support probable cause for a warrant or for an arrest. What matters, what actually drives the investigation, is what Google provides to law enforcement when served with a valid subpoena requesting search records for Nancy Guthrie's address. And that data, That legally obtained investigative-grade information has not been made public. We do not know if investigators have requested it, though it would be extraordinary if they had not given the resources devoted to this case. We do not know what Google's response showed if they did request it, and we do not know whether the searches that appear in public Google Trends data correspond to real searches that investigators have identified and traced to specific individuals. So we are left with uncertainty. The Fox News report reveals publicly visible patterns that, if they are real, would be highly significant evidence of planning and surveillance. But the patterns might not be real, and even if they are real, the public cannot know who made the searches or how those searches connect to other evidence without access to information that only law enforcement possesses. What we can do is examine how investigators would use search data, if it exists, and if it is traceable, because understanding that process helps us understand the potential significance of this evidence if it proves to be real rather than noise. When law enforcement serves a subpoena on Google requesting records of searches for a specific term or address, Google does not respond with the aggregated privacy-protected data that appears in Google Trends. Google responds with raw search logs pulled from their internal databases. Those logs contain extraordinarily detailed information about each query. First and most fundamentally, the logs contain the search terms exactly as they were entered. If someone searched for Nancy's address, the log shows the exact text they typed. If they misspelled it, the log shows the misspelling. If they included additional terms in the search like Nancy Guthrie address Tucson or Catalina Foothills address along with the specific street and number, the log shows exactly what combination of terms they used. Second, the logs contain precise timestamps, not the weekly aggregation that Google Trends shows to protect privacy, but exact date and time down to the second. If someone searched for Nancy's address at 2:37:18 a.m. on January 11, 2026, the log shows that exact moment. That precision allows investigators to cross-reference search times against other evidence. Was there any suspicious activity in Nancy's neighborhood at that time? Were there any 911 calls? Was there anything captured on security cameras from nearby homes? The timestamp creates the possibility of connecting the digital evidence of the search to physical evidence of presence in the area. Third, the logs contain IP addresses. Every device that connects to the internet is assigned an IP address by the internet service provider or cellular network that provides the connection. When you search Google, your IP address is logged with the search. That IP address can be traced back to the service provider and ultimately to the account holder who was using that connection when the search occurred. For searches made from a home internet connection, the IP address traces to a residential broadband account with a specific subscriber name and billing address. Investigators can subpoena the internet service provider using the IP address to identify who controls the account. For searches made from a mobile device using cellular data, the IP address traces to a cellular carrier and to a specific phone number and account. Again, investigators can subpoena the carrier to identify the subscriber. For searches made from public Wi-Fi at locations like coffee shops or libraries, the IP address traces to the business or institution providing the Wi-Fi, which makes individual identification more difficult but not impossible. Many public Wi-Fi systems require some form of registration or agreement before providing access, creating logs of who used the connection at what times. And even without those logs, the fact that a search was made from a public Wi-Fi location at a specific time can be combined with other evidence like surveillance video from the location to identify who was there. Fourth, the logs contain geographic location data. For searches made from mobile devices with GPS enabled, Google logs the precise geographic coordinates where the device was located when the search occurred. This is extraordinarily valuable data because it can place a device, and by extension the person holding it, at a specific location at a specific time. If someone searched for Nancy's address from a location near her home, that geographic data proves they were in the area. If someone searched for it repeatedly from the same location, that establishes a pattern of where they live or work or spend time. Even for searches made from devices without GPS or where location services are disabled, IP-based geolocation provides approximate location based on where the internet service provider assigns IP addresses from their available pools. This is less precise than GPS, but still provides city or neighborhood level information about where a search originated. Fifth, if the person who made the search was logged into a Google account at the time, the logs contain direct identification. Your Google account is tied to your identity through the email address you used to create it, through recovery information you provided, through payment methods if you have purchased anything through Google services, and through a comprehensive profile that Google maintains of your activity across all of their services. If you searched for Nancy's address while logged into your Google account, investigators know exactly who you are the moment they receive the search logs. There is no anonymity. There is no guessing. Your name is in the data. And sixth, the logs contain information about what the user did after the search. If you clicked on a map result, the log shows which specific result you clicked and how long you spent viewing it. If you switched to satellite view in Google Maps, that action is logged. If you zoomed in to study the property in detail, that interaction is logged. If you clicked through to Street View to see ground-level imagery, that is logged. If you clicked on real estate websites or property records that appeared in the search results, those clicks are logged. All of that click-through behavior provides investigators with insight into what the person was trying to learn and how much attention they devoted to studying the address. Someone who searches for an address, clicks on a map result, spends 2 seconds looking at it, and moves on to something else is exhibiting different behavior from someone who searches for an address, clicks on a map, zooms into satellite view, studies the property for several minutes, switches to Street View, looks at the approach from multiple angles, and then clicks through to property records to learn more. The latter behavior pattern suggests deep interest and sustained attention that goes well beyond casual curiosity. So if investigators subpoena Google and receive search logs showing that Nancy's address was searched for during the time frames that Fox News identified in Google Trends data, those logs provide identification and behavior data that can be extraordinarily valuable for the investigation. Take a moment right now to browse through the True Crime Vault channel. We have dozens of in-depth analyses of major cases, breaking down evidence, explaining investigative techniques, and following cases from initial reports through to resolution. If you value the kind of detailed, evidence-based content we produce here, you will find hours of additional material that goes into this same level of depth on other cases. Subscribe so you never miss an upload. Hit that like button on this video, and drop a comment below telling us whether you think the Google search evidence is legitimate or whether you think it is noise. We want to hear your analysis. Now let us continue examining how this evidence could connect to everything else investigators have developed. The question that matters most is not whether searches appear in Google Trends data, but whether real searches occurred and whether those real searches, if they exist, can be traced to an individual who also connects to other evidence in the case. This is where the concept of convergence becomes critical. No single piece of evidence has to prove the entire case by itself. The Walmart backpack purchase data does not have to identify the perpetrator on its own. The DNA from the glove does not have to match someone in CODIS for it to be valuable. The Google search records, if they are real, do not have to solve the case independently. What matters is whether multiple pieces of evidence point to the same person in ways that cannot be explained by coincidence. Imagine a scenario where investigators subpoena Google and learn that a specific individual searched for Nancy's address multiple times between June 2025 and January 2026. That individual's IP address and Google account clearly identify them. Now imagine that the same individual purchased an Ozark Trail hiker pack from Walmart in December 2025 or January 2026. That purchase is documented in Walmart's transaction records because they used a credit card and their name is on the receipt. Now imagine that DNA extracted from the glove found near Nancy's home matches a sample obtained from this individual. And imagine that this same person is on the 40 name list that FBI agents have been taking to gun stores because other evidence or tips identified them as a person of interest. In that scenario, you have 4 independent lines of evidence converging on a single individual. The Google searches show they were interested in Nancy's address for months before she disappeared. The Walmart purchase shows they bought the backpack visible in the FBI footage. The DNA shows they wore or touched the glove found near the scene. And the inclusion on the 40 name list shows that other investigative work had already identified them as worthy of examination. That convergence is overwhelming. It is the kind of evidence that supports probable cause for arrest and that builds toward proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Each piece reinforces the others. Each piece makes the others more significant. and together they create a picture that is far stronger than any individual piece could create alone. But the convergence only happens if the evidence is real and traceable. If the Google searches are algorithmic noise, they cannot converge with anything. If the Walmart purchase records show multiple people bought the backpack and there is no way to narrow it down further, that piece cannot converge effectively. If the DNA from the glove is degraded or contaminated and cannot produce a reliable profile, that piece cannot converge. Investigation is the process of determining what is real, what is traceable, what is reliable, and what connects. The January 11th date deserves additional attention because it represents a potential convergence point within the digital evidence itself. If Google search logs show that someone searched for Nancy's address on January 11th, and if security camera footage from that date shows a vehicle or an individual in Nancy's neighborhood during the time frame the neighbor flagged in the Ring app request, and if that vehicle or individual can be connected to other evidence, that is convergence. 3 separate pieces of evidence: the Google search, the neighbor's concern about activity that evening, and potential video footage, all pointing to the same date and potentially to the same person. Law enforcement has officially requested security video from homes within 2 miles of Nancy's property for the time frame from January 1st through February 2nd. That request encompasses January 11th. If neighbors have provided footage from that date showing anything unusual, anything that captured attention or that seemed out of place, investigators would be examining that footage in the context of the Google search data and the neighbor's Ring app post. What might they be looking for? An unfamiliar vehicle moving slowly through the neighborhood or parking near Nancy's home. A vehicle that appears multiple times on different cameras, suggesting someone drove through the area more than once. A person walking in the neighborhood at an unusual hour. A vehicle with occupants who appear to be looking at homes or studying the area rather than simply driving through. Any behavior that suggests surveillance or reconnaissance rather than legitimate presence in a residential neighborhood late in the evening. If such footage exists, and if the vehicle or individual in that footage can be identified and connected to the person who made the Google searches, that connection is powerful evidence. It shows that the digital surveillance, the online research of Nancy's address, was followed by physical surveillance, by actually visiting the location to see it in person. And it establishes that the physical surveillance occurred 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared, placing it within a time frame consistent with final preparations before executing a plan. The salary search for Savannah Guthrie is the piece of this digital evidence that most clearly points to financial motivation. Someone wanted to know how much money Savannah made. Why? What purpose does that knowledge serve if you are not planning something that involves the family's financial resources? Legitimate reasons exist. Journalists and media industry professionals might research salaries as part of understanding the compensation structure in their field. Students studying journalism might look up how much prominent anchors earn to understand career potential. Fans or curious members of the public might search out of general interest in celebrity earnings. None of those motivations are inherently suspicious. But when the search occurs in Tucson, the city where Savannah's mother lives, 6 weeks before that mother disappears under circumstances that eventually involve ransom demands for millions of dollars, the context transforms what might be innocent curiosity into evidence of planning. Someone in Tucson wanted to know about Savannah's salary in December. Someone took Nancy in February. Someone sent ransom notes demanding millions. The timeline and the geographic connection create a narrative of cause and effect that is hard to ignore. If the salary search came from the same source as the address searches, the evidence becomes much stronger. A single individual researching both Nancy's address and Savannah's salary is engaging in targeted research about this specific family. That is not random. That is not the kind of broad curiosity that would lead someone to search for multiple celebrity salaries or to look up addresses in multiple neighborhoods. That is focused interest in the Guthrie family specifically. And if that focused interest can be connected through subpoenaed records to a specific individual who also purchased the Walmart backpack and whose DNA matches the glove, you have a narrative that tells the entire story of the crime from initial target selection through research, through planning, through execution. We also need to address the alternative explanation that the Google Trends data does not represent real searches at all, that it is entirely or primarily algorithmic noise inserted by Google to protect privacy, and that investigators pursuing this line of evidence are chasing something that does not exist. This is a real possibility that we cannot dismiss. Google was explicit in their statement to Fox News. For topics with low or no searches, Google Trends often mixes in random noise. A spike in the chart is not definitive evidence that a search happened. If Google's algorithms determined that showing accurate data for searches of Nancy's address would create a privacy risk by allowing someone to be identified through the public trends tool, those algorithms might have inserted fake data points that show activity where none occurred. How would Google's algorithms make that determination? By analyzing how many searches for a particular term occur and how easily those searches could be traced back to individuals if the data were public. A term that gets millions of searches per day from users all over the world is safe to show accurately in Google Trends because no individual searcher can be identified within that massive volume. But a term that gets 1 or 2 searches from a specific city during a specific week is potentially identifiable. Someone could use that information to narrow down who might have searched, particularly if they have other information about who was in that city during that time. To prevent that kind of identification, Google's privacy protection systems might show that search is occurring at a different time or in a different location, or might insert completely fake searches to make it impossible to determine which data points are real and which are noise. The result is that Google Trends becomes useless for identifying individual searches while remaining useful for its intended purpose of showing aggregate trends across large populations. If the searches that Fox News found in Google Trends are entirely noise, then investigators following this lead are pursuing something that does not exist. They would request subpoenaed search logs from Google and receive either empty results showing no searches for Nancy's address occurred during those time frames, or results showing searches that do not match the Google Trends pattern and that have innocent explanations. But investigators would not rely only on Google Trends data. They would subpoena the actual logs precisely because Google Trends is not reliable for this purpose. And if the subpoenaed logs show real searches that match the time frames and the pattern that Fox News identified, then the Google Trends data, despite its limitations and despite Google's disclaimer about noise, was reflecting something real. The fact that Fox News was able to find these patterns suggests that even if noise is present, there might be signal underneath it. Google's algorithms do not generate completely random noise. They base their privacy protection strategies on actual usage patterns while obscuring the details. The presence of activity in Google Trends for Nancy's address during multiple distinct timeframes across 8 months could mean that real searches occurred during some or all of those windows and that Google Trends is showing those searches with privacy protection applied. So where does this leave the investigation and where does it leave our understanding of what this evidence means? We are left with uncertainty about the reliability of the specific data points, but with confidence that investigators have access to tools that can resolve that uncertainty. Google Trends data is suggestive. It creates a timeline that fits with other evidence of planning and premeditation. It tells a story about surveillance that extended across months, but it is not itself evidence that can be used in court or that proves anything definitively. What matters is whether law enforcement has subpoenaed Google for search logs, what those logs show if they have been produced, and whether the individuals identified in those logs connect to other evidence. That information is not public. It may not become public until charges are filed, but the investigative work to obtain and analyze that data is almost certainly ongoing. The Nancy Guthrie investigation has now been active for more than 18 days. It has involved hundreds of law enforcement personnel from multiple agencies. It has generated national media attention. It has produced multiple lines of physical and digital evidence that investigators are pursuing simultaneously. The Walmart backpack identification, the DNA analysis from the glove, the 40-name suspect list, the gun store canvassing, the official clearing of the family, and now, the revelation that publicly visible Google Trends data shows patterns of searches that, if they are real, demonstrate months of planning and surveillance. Every day that passes is another day that investigators are building their case. Every subpoena that comes back from Google, from Walmart, from cellular carriers, from internet service providers adds data to the investigation. Every DNA analysis that completes adds confirmation or exclusion. Every interview conducted, every security video reviewed, every tip that comes in and gets investigated adds to the cumulative understanding of what happened and who is responsible. Cases like this get solved through patience, through methodical work, through the systematic pursuit of every available lead and the careful documentation of every piece of evidence. The Google search data, if it proves to be real and traceable, will be one piece among many. But it could be an important piece because it speaks to premeditation, to planning, to the kind of sustained criminal intent that prosecutors value highly when making charging decisions and when arguing cases before juries. Before we conclude, I want to encourage you one more time to engage with this content and with this community. If you have watched this far, if you have stayed with this analysis through all of its complexity and all of its uncertainty, and all of its careful examination of what we know versus what we suspect, then you are exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. Subscribe to True Crime Vault if you have not already. We cover cases with this level of depth, this commitment to evidence over speculation, this honesty about what we can know and what we cannot. Turn on notifications. Hit that like button on this video because it tells YouTube that this content is valuable and should be shown to more people. And please, drop a comment below. Tell us what you think about the Google search evidence. Do you believe these searches are real, or are they algorithmic noise? Do you think the January 11th connection is significant? What would you do if you were investigating this case and you received this data? The comment section on this channel is intelligent, thoughtful, and engaged. We read every comment. And the discussion that happens below these videos is often as valuable as the videos themselves. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 18 days. Her family wants her home. Law enforcement is using every available tool to find her and to identify who took her. And the public, through reporting like what Fox News has done on the Google search data, is becoming aware of just how much digital evidence exists in modern crimes and how investigators work to access and analyze that evidence. The Google searches, if they are real, tell a story about someone who identified Nancy as a target, studied her property, evaluated her family's resources, and planned for months before executing a crime that involved coming to her home armed, masked, and prepared to disable her security systems. That story, that timeline of planning and surveillance, is consistent with everything else we know about how this crime unfolded. The careful approach visible in the FBI footage, the systematic disabling of cameras, the advanced knowledge of where those cameras were and how to deal with them. All of it points to someone who prepared thoroughly for what they did on the night of January 31st. If the Google searches are noise, if they are artifacts of privacy protection algorithms rather than records of real queries, then this line of evidence leads nowhere, and investigators are pursuing other threads. But even in that scenario, the systematic investigation of digital evidence continues. Investigators are still examining every possible source of information about who might have been researching Nancy or her property. They are still subpoenaing records. They are still cross-referencing data. They are still building the case piece by piece. And the broader lesson, regardless of whether these specific searches are real, is that digital evidence has transformed criminal investigation in ways that most people do not fully appreciate. Every online action creates a record. Every search, every website visit, every map lookup, every image view generates data that is stored somewhere and that can potentially be accessed through legal process when it becomes relevant to an investigation. The person who came to Nancy Guthrie's home on the night of January 31st may have believed they were being careful. They wore a mask to prevent facial identification. They wore gloves to prevent fingerprint deposition. They removed the camera to eliminate the visual record of their presence. But if they searched for Nancy's address from their home internet connection or from their smartphone in the months before they came, they created a digital record that is far more durable and far more traceable than any fingerprint or any facial image captured by a camera. That digital record, if it exists and if investigators can access it and trace it, may be what identifies them. It may be what connects them to the backpack purchase and to the DNA evidence and to the 40-name list. It may be what turns months of patient investigative work into probable cause for arrest and into the evidence needed to bring charges and to pursue justice. If you have any information about this case, if you made innocent searches for Nancy's address or for Savannah's salary and want to come forward to be cleared, if you know someone who was unusually interested in the Guthrie family in the months before Nancy disappeared, contact law enforcement immediately. The FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. The Pima County Sheriff's Department non-emergency line is 520-351-4900. Crime Stoppers allows anonymous tips, And there are now $200,000 in rewards available through separate offers from the FBI and from Crime Stoppers. Do not assume that what you know is too small to matter. In an investigation of this scale and complexity, details that seem minor can be the connections that tie everything together. Someone who remembers seeing an unfamiliar vehicle in Nancy's neighborhood on January 11th. Someone who knows a person who was asking questions about the Guthrie family. Someone who works in tech and can provide insight into how IP addresses work or how location data gets logged. Every piece of information helps investigators build the complete picture. Subscribe to True Crime Vault. Hit that notification bell. Like this video. Comment below with your thoughts. Visit our channel to see all of our other in-depth case analyses. We are here covering the Nancy Guthrie investigation, and we will continue to be here through every development until this case reaches its conclusion. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found. Her family deserves answers. And the investigative work happening right now, the subpoenas being served, the records being analyzed, the evidence being cross-referenced, is how those answers will eventually emerge. The Google search data, real or noise, is part of that work, and True Crime Vault will be here documenting every step of the process as it unfolds.